The twin suns of Hanul 7 painted the sky in shades of orange and pink as Park Minji walked across the school playground, her boots crunching softly on the imported earth grass. The children's laughter echoed across New Busan Colony, a sound that had become as natural as breathing over the past 9 years. "All right, everyone, morning exercises," she called out, clapping her hands together. 47 bright faces turned toward her, ranging from tiny 6-year-old Lee Ji-won, with her pigtails bouncing, to the almost adult Kim Tae-ho, who towered over. The younger kids at 16. The colony stretched out behind them like a patchwork quilt of silver domes and green fields. 3,000 people called this place home, most of them farmers, engineers, and their families, who had traveled here seeking a peaceful life away from the crowded core worlds. The settlement had no military base, no strategic resources, nothing that would attract unwanted attention from the galaxy's darker corners. That isolation had always been their greatest protection. Until today. High above the planet's atmosphere, the Zelkari slaver vessel, Bloodhawk, drifted silently like a mechanical predator. Captain Vexistar pressed his scaled face against the scanner display, his 4 eyes studying the movements below with cold calculation. His ship was massive, nearly 1 kilometer long, painted in the rust-red colors of dried blood that marked all. Zelkari vessels, fresh hunting grounds, he hissed to his first mate Kralvex. The database says these humans are new to space travel, weak, defenseless. The scanner showed dozens of the bipedal creatures moving in organized patterns around what appeared to be some kind of learning facility. Perfect. Young specimens always brought the highest prices in the slave markets of the Outer Rim. Vextar had been raiding peaceful worlds for 30 years, ever since the Zelkari Empire had discovered that certain species made excellent workers in their deep space mining operations. Humans, according to their intelligence reports, were physically robust but technologically primitive. They had only been exploring space for a few decades, unlike the Zelkari, who had been conquering star systems for centuries. "Begin harvest." "Protocol," Vextar commanded, his voice carrying across the bridge. "Deploy the stun nets. I want them alive and undamaged." 3 sleek shuttles detached from the Bloodhawk's belly, their hulls shimmering with cloaking technology as they descended toward the planet's surface. Each shuttle carried a dozen Zelkari warriors, armed with neural disruptors and containment fields. Down on the playground, Park Minji was helping little Cho Yunho tie his shoelaces when the first shuttle materialized out of thin air just 20 meters away. The children stopped their games, pointing and chattering with curiosity rather than fear. They had never seen alien technology before. "Students, please step back," Minji said, her teacher's instincts kicking in even as her blood ran cold. The sleek metallic craft was unlike anything in the colony's vehicle inventory. The shuttle's ramp dropped with a hydraulic hiss, and tall reptilian figures emerged wearing dark armor that seemed to absorb light. Their leader, a massive Zelkari sergeant named Threx, raised a device that looked like a twisted metal flower. "Harvesting commencing," he growled in his own language, pressing the activation stud. A wave of blue energy erupted from the device, spreading across the playground like ripples on a pond. Every human it touched crumpled to the ground, their nervous systems overwhelmed by the neural disruptor field. The children collapsed where they stood, their small bodies twitching as the alien technology rendered them unconscious. Kim Tae-ho, the oldest student, managed to stay on his feet for a few precious seconds longer than the others. His body was still developing, more resistant to the neural field. He stumbled toward the younger children, trying to shield 8-year-old Lee. Ji-won with his own body as she fell. Her toy rabbit, a worn brown thing named Hoppy that her grandmother had made, tumbled from her small fingers. "No!" Tae-ho shouted, his voice slurring as the weapon's effects finally overwhelmed him. He crashed to the ground beside Ji-won, his hand still reaching protectively toward the little girl. The Zelkari moved with practiced efficiency. Gravity lifts hummed to life, floating the unconscious children toward the waiting shuttles. They worked in teams, cataloging each specimen by apparent age and physical condition. The younger ones would be trained as domestic servants, while the older ones could handle more demanding labor. Within minutes, all 47 students were loaded into containment pods aboard the shuttles. The aliens paid no attention to Park Minji, who lay unconscious near the playground equipment. Adult humans were considered too set in their ways to make good slaves. As the shuttles prepared to depart, Sergeant Threx noticed a small communication device near the school's entrance. The colony's emergency beacon was blinking weakly, damaged but still functional. He raised his weapon to destroy it completely, but his orders were to minimize evidence of alien contact. The primitive humans would blame the disappearance on natural disasters or equipment failures. The beacon transmitted its final burst of data just as the shuttles lifted off, carrying their precious cargo toward the waiting Bloodhawk. The message was automatically compressed and sent via quantum relay to the nearest human communication hub. New Busan Colony. Children missing. Unknown hostiles. Immediate assistance required. Captain Vextar watched the successful harvest from his command chair, already calculating the profits. 47 healthy young humans would bring enough credits to fund his next 3 raiding expeditions. The galactic slave markets always had demand for fresh workers, especially from newly discovered species. What the Zelkari captain didn't know was that New Busan Colony had been chosen specifically for its isolation by families who valued peace above all else. These weren't random farmers and engineers. They were retired military personnel, former deep space explorers, and veterans of humanity's bloodiest conflicts who had earned the right to raise their children in safety. The emergency beacon's message would reach people who understood exactly what it meant, and who possessed the skills and connections to respond with overwhelming force. The Bloodhawk jumped to hyperspace, carrying its cargo toward the Zelkari slave markets, completely unaware that they had just declared war on the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. The emergency klaxon pierced through the quiet hum of Terra Command's operations center like a knife through silk. Admiral Choi Hyunwoo looked up from the holographic fleet deployment charts floating above his desk, his weathered face creased with concern. In 40 years of military service, he had heard that particular alarm only during the darkest moments of the Centauri Wars. "Admiral?" Lieutenant Park Sujin's voice cracked as she approached his command station, her hands trembling as she held the priority datapad. "We have a code black from New Busan Colony." Choi took the device, his eyes scanning the brief message transmitted by the colony's dying emergency beacon. The words seemed to blur together at first, his mind refusing to process what he was reading. Then reality hit him like a physical blow to the chest. 47 children missing. Unknown hostiles. His grandson's name appeared on the casualty list. Park Jiho, age 12, student at New Busan Primary Academy. The boy's parents had moved to the Rim world specifically to give him a peaceful childhood, away from the military life that had consumed 3 generations of their family. "Sir?" Lieutenant Park's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Your orders?" Choi's hands gripped the edge of his desk until his knuckles turned white. For a moment, the composed military commander disappeared, replaced by a grandfather whose world had just shattered. Then his training reasserted itself, but something fundamental had changed in his eyes. They had turned cold as deep space. "Activate the blood debt protocol," he said quietly. Lieutenant Park's face went pale. The blood debt was ancient human custom that predated their expansion into space, a sacred vow that stretched back to their earliest civilizations. When children were threatened, every human warrior was bound by honor to respond, regardless of rank, service branch, or current assignment. "Sir, that will mobilize every veteran in human space. The political implications alone—" "Do it." Choi's voice carried the absolute authority of a man who had commanded fleets in humanity's darkest hour. "Send the coded transmission to all networks, military, civilian, mercenary, and deep space explorer channels, every frequency we have." The message that went out was simple, broadcast in the old military shorthand that every human veteran understood. "Children taken. Blood debt called. Hanul 7 system. All who can respond, respond now." Within hours, the effect was like watching a sleeping giant wake up and flex its muscles for the first time. Across human space, retired soldiers suddenly cancelled vacation plans. Mercenary captains broke existing contracts. and civilian freight haulers began retrofitting their ships with weapons systems they had hoped never to use again. Captain Song. Minyo was 3 days into a profitable escort mission for Galactic Mining Consortium when the transmission reached his gunship, Iron Phoenix. His crew of 12 former military specialists looked to him expectantly as he read the message on the bridge's main screen. "Boss?" asked his weapons officer, Kim Dae-sung, a former Navy gunnery sergeant whose cybernetic arm gleamed under the ship's lighting. "What's the call?" Song stood up from his captain's chair, his scarred face grim. The old burn marks on his left cheek, souvenirs from the Battle of Proxima Station, seemed to pulse with renewed life. "Helm, plot a course for Hanul 7, maximum burn." "But, sir," his navigator protested, "we'll forfeit our contract fee. That's 3 million credits down the drain." Song turned to face his crew, and they saw something in his expression that reminded them why they had followed him through a dozen firefights across the galaxy's most dangerous sectors. Listen carefully. No job, no amount of money, no contract in this galaxy is worth more than human children. We took an oath when we put on the uniform, and that oath doesn't expire just because we went private. He activated the ship's intercom. "All hands, this is the captain. We're changing course, combat stations in 30 minutes. Check your gear, check your weapons, and say your prayers. We're going to war." Similar scenes played out across hundreds of ships throughout human space. The response was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Military vessels broke formation to join the growing armada. Merchant ships armed themselves with whatever weapons they could acquire. Even deep space research vessels, crewed by scientists and explorers, began installing weapon systems and heading toward the Hanul 7 system. But the most dramatic response came from the darkness between the stars. Commander Yoon Ji-hye floated in, the cramped bridge of her stealth frigate Shadow Walker, which had been drifting powerless in the void for 3 years. Her ship was one of dozens of sleeper cells positioned throughout the galaxy during the Centauri Wars, designed to remain hidden until humanity faced an existential threat. The automated systems that had been monitoring communications channels for years suddenly blazed to life, waking her crew from their rotation cycles. The ship's fusion reactor hummed back to full power for the first time in 36 months. "Ma'am," reported Chief Petty Officer Lee Young-ho, shaking off the grogginess of extended hibernation, "we're picking up the blood debt signal. Multiple human fleets are converging on Hanul 7. Yoon studied the tactical display as it populated with friendly contacts. What she saw made her smile for the first time in years. Hundreds of ships were appearing on sensors, emerging from hiding places throughout the galaxy. Humanity's true defensive network was revealing itself like a flower blooming in fast forward. "Well, I'll be damned," she whispered. "They actually thought we only had a few hundred ships." The truth was that humanity had learned hard lessons during their early expansion into space. They had encountered hostile species before, faced extinction-level threats, and survived only through careful preparation and strategic deception. For every visible human military vessel, 3 more waited in the darkness, crewed by volunteers who had given up normal lives to serve as humanity's hidden guardians. Admiral Choi watched the tactical displays at Terra Command as the response grew beyond his wildest expectations. Ships were converging from every direction, their transponder signals painting the holographic star chart in brilliant blue points of light. Retired admirals came out of retirement, former Special Forces operators activated their old squads, and civilian ship captains who had never fired a shot in anger suddenly found themselves part of humanity's largest military mobilization since the Centauri Wars. "Admiral," reported his intelligence officer, Major Han Jun, "we're tracking over 2,000 vessels responding to the blood debt call, and more are joining every hour. The Galactic Council is sending urgent diplomatic messages asking about our military buildup." Choi ignored the diplomatic channels completely. Let the other species wonder, let them worry. For too long, humanity had played the role of reasonable newcomers to galactic civilization, hiding their true capabilities behind diplomatic smiles and trade agreements. "Signal all responding vessels," he commanded. "Form up at Rally Point Bravo, 1 light-year from Hanul 7. We hunt as a pack, and we don't stop until every child is home safe." As news of the mobilization spread through the galaxy's communication networks, other species began to take notice. The peaceful, diplomatic humans were revealing a side of themselves that most alien civilizations had never imagined existed. Ships that had been thought decommissioned suddenly appeared on long-range sensors. Weapon systems that violated several galactic treaties powered up without apology. And at the center of it all, a cold fury that spoke of humanity's willingness to burn down the galaxy if necessary to protect their young. The hunt for the missing children of New Busan had begun, and nothing in the universe would be the same when it ended. The crystal spires of the Zelkari High Command stretched toward the crimson sky of their homeworld like twisted fingers, each tower housing the military minds that had conquered 17 star systems over the past century. Inside the war room at the apex of the tallest spire, Warmaster Krelthar studied the tactical displays with the casual confidence of a predator who had never known defeat. His scaled hide bore the ritual scars of a dozen successful campaigns, and his four eyes gleamed with the cold intelligence that had made him the most feared military commander in Zelkari space. The raid on the human colony had been routine, barely worth his personal attention. Another primitive species to be harvested and sold, nothing more. War Master, his intelligence officer, Sub-Commander Vexrol, approached with obvious reluctance. "We're receiving reports from our border scouts. The humans appear to be responding to yesterday's harvest operation." Krelthar's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Responding? Let me guess. They've dispatched a single diplomatic vessel to file a formal protest with the Galactic Consortium. How charmingly civilized." "Sir, it's not exactly... Or perhaps they've sent their entire fleet," Krelthar continued, making air quotes with his clawed hands. "All 200 of their pathetic vessels, no doubt demanding we return their precious offspring in exchange for favorable trade agreements." The tactical display suddenly erupted with warning alerts as data streamed in from 17 different border systems. Red dots appeared on the holographic star map, like drops of blood, each representing human vessels that had somehow appeared at strategic points along the Zelkari frontier. Vexrol's face turned the pale yellow color that indicated extreme stress in his species. "Sir, initial reports show human vessels at Kef 9 Trelvor Zinari Station and 14 other systems. They're not requesting dialogue." "Impossible," Krelthar snarled, his confidence wavering for the first time in decades. "Our intelligence reports clearly state that the humans possess barely 200 combat vessels. They're a young species, barely 3 decades into space exploration. They lack the industrial capacity for..." His words died as the communication officer's station exploded with incoming transmissions. The main display showed a flood of contact reports from across Zelkari space, each more impossible than the last. "Sir," the communications officer stammered, "we're now detecting over 3,000 human vessels. The number is growing by the hour. They're appearing at every major hyperspace junction leading to our territory." Krelthar stared at the display in disbelief. The red dots representing human ships were multiplying like a virus, surrounding Zelkari, space in a tightening noose. Ships were emerging from empty space where their sensors had detected nothing moments before. It was as if humanity had been hiding an entire shadow fleet in the darkness between stars. "This is impossible," he repeated, but his voice now carried a note of uncertainty. "Run a full scan of our intelligence archives. Find out where these ships came from." While his staff scrambled to understand the scope of the human response, the answer came in the form of a transmission broadcast on every communication frequency simultaneously. The message cut through their military encryption like it was made of paper, bypassing their security systems with contemptuous ease. Commander Yoon Jihye's face appeared on every screen in the war room, her expression calm and professional despite the surgical coldness in her eyes. She spoke in perfect Zelkari, her pronunciation flawless despite the alien language's complex tonal structure. "Attention, Zelkari High Command. You have taken our children from New Busan Colony. This is not a negotiation, nor is it a diplomatic protest. This is a statement of fact. You have 72 hours to return every human child, unharmed and unmodified, to the coordinates we are transmitting. Failure to comply will result in the systematic elimination of your species from this galaxy. The transmission continued as tactical data flowed across the screen, showing the positions of human vessels throughout Zelkari space. The display was clearly meant to demonstrate that humanity's response was not random or emotional, but calculated and overwhelming. You may wonder why your intelligence was so spectacularly wrong about our capabilities, Yoon continued. The answer is simple. We are not a young species stumbling into the stars. We are an ancient race of hunters who learned long ago that the greatest advantage in any conflict is to let your enemy underestimate you. What you perceived as weakness was actually patience. The war room fell silent, except for the hum of electronics and the distant sound of Krelthar's breathing, which had become rapid and shallow. Your databases classify humans as recently spacefaring and technologically primitive. This was intentional misinformation. We have been exploring the galaxy for far longer than your records indicate. The ships you see surrounding your territory are not our entire fleet. They are merely the forces we can spare for a minor policing action. On the tactical display, more red dots continued to appear. The human fleet was now approaching 4,000 vessels, with no sign of the buildup. Slowing down. We have spent decades preparing for scenarios exactly like this. Hidden bases throughout the galaxy, sleeper ships in dark space, deep cover agents in every major civilization. We hoped never to reveal these capabilities, but you have forced our hand by targeting our children. Krelthar realized his mandibles were clicking uncontrollably, a sign of extreme agitation. Around him, his senior staff watched in stunned silence as their understanding of galactic power structures crumbled in real time. Your species has exactly 72 hours to return what you have stolen. After that deadline, we begin the process of removing every Zelkari from existence. We will not negotiate. We will not show mercy. We will not stop until either our children are returned or your empire is reduced to cosmic dust. The transmission cut off, leaving the war room in absolute silence. Across the galaxy, other species were receiving similar wake-up calls. Ambassador Rithkar of the Galactic Consortium frantically tried to establish communication with human diplomatic channels, only to receive automated responses that chilled him to his core. The Terran Federation has suspended all diplomatic relations, pending the return of abducted human children. Any attempt to interfere with human military operations will be considered an act of war. The Visari Trade Alliance, which had profitable relationships with both humans and Zelkari, found their communication requests bouncing off human networks like stones off armor plating. Their messages were returned with a simple addendum. Business will resume when our children are home. Even the mighty Coraxian Empire, whose fleets had patrolled the galaxy for millennia, received a polite but firm warning when their scouts approached human formations. Maintain minimum distance of 10 light-years, or be considered hostile. We have no quarrel with you, but we will destroy any vessel that interferes with this operation. Back in the Zelkari war room, Krelthar stared at the tactical display as the reality of their situation became clear. The humans weren't posturing or making empty threats. They had systematically surrounded Zelkari space with overwhelming force and were prepared to act on their ultimatum. "Sir," Vexrol whispered, "what are your orders?" For the first time in his military career, Warmaster Krelthar had no answer. His species had awakened something that they were completely unprepared to face, and the 72-hour countdown had already begun. The hunting packs of humanity had been unleashed, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. The chronometer on Lieutenant Colonel Bay Sumin's battle armor displayed the exact moment when humanity's patience ran out. 72 hours, 0 minutes, and 1 second since the ultimatum. She stood on the bridge of the assault cruiser, Righteous Fury, watching the Zelkari mining station at Kef 9 grow larger on the main view screen. "All units, this is Hammer 1, she spoke into her helmet comm, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "The deadline has passed. Execute Operation Childguard. Remember, we're not here to conquer. We're here to bring our kids home." The mining station was a massive structure, its industrial arms reaching out like metal tentacles to strip ore from nearby asteroids. Intelligence reports indicated it housed over 10,000 Zelkari workers and a garrison of 500 soldiers. Under normal circumstances, assaulting such a fortified position would require overwhelming force and result in massive casualties. But these weren't normal circumstances, and humanity had learned new ways of war. "Stealth bombers, you are cleared. For approach," Bay commanded. 3 ships that had been invisible to all sensors suddenly materialized just kilometers from the station, their adaptive camouflage dropping away like shed skin. The Zelkari defenders barely had time to register the threat before precisely targeted plasma bolts disabled their weapon systems. The attack was surgical in its precision. Communications arrays went dark, defensive turrets sparked and died, and the station's main power grid flickered as human hackers infiltrated their computer systems. Within minutes, the mighty fortress was reduced to a helpless metal shell floating in space. "Attention, Zelkari defenders," Bay's voice echoed through the station's emergency communication system. "This is Lieutenant Colonel Bay Sumin of the Terran Defense Force. Your weapons are disabled, your communications are down, and your power grid is under our control. Surrender now, and you will be treated according to galactic conventions of war." The response came in the form of confused chatter on captured frequencies. The Zelkari garrison commander, a veteran of dozen battles, couldn't understand how his impregnable fortress had been neutralized in under 10 minutes. "This is impossible," he transmitted on an open channel, his voice cracking with disbelief. "How did you penetrate our defenses so easily?" Bay's response was cold and professional. "We've been watching you for years, studying your tactics, learning your weaknesses. Every fortress you built, every weapon you deployed, every strategy you developed, we planned for all of it. The only reason you never saw us coming is because we didn't want you to." The boarding pods launched from her ships like silver bullets, their armored hulls designed to penetrate station docking bays with minimal damage. Inside each pod, human Marines checked their weapons one final time, their faces grim behind tactical visors. As the pods made contact with the station, Bay's forces moved through the corridors with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine. They had trained for this exact scenario dozens of times, using detailed intelligence gathered by deep cover agents over several years. The Zelkari defenders found themselves facing soldiers who seemed to anticipate their every move. Human troops appeared around corners before the aliens could set up defensive positions. Smoke grenades filled strategic choke points exactly when Zelkari reinforcements tried to move through them. It was as if the humans could see the future. Sector 7 secured, reported Sergeant Kim Min-seok, his squad having taken the station's command center without firing a shot. "Enemy commander is requesting terms of surrender." "Bring him to me," Bay ordered, making her way through the station's main corridors. The Zelkari workers they encountered cowered against the walls, their 4 eyes wide with terror. But the humans passed them by without violence, focused entirely on military targets. When she entered the command center, the Zelkari garrison commander was already kneeling in surrender, his weapons discarded. He was an old soldier, his scales scarred from previous battles, but his eyes now held the hollow look of someone whose entire worldview had just collapsed. "We are not here for conquest," Bay announced, her words broadcast throughout the station. "We are not here to claim territory or resources. We are here for our children. Point us toward your slave markets. Provide us with shipping routes and schedules, and you live. Resist and you share the fate of those who took our young." Hundreds of light years away, Captain Na Yunbi floated in the cramped bridge of her stealth, frigate Silent Hunter, watching her prey through advanced sensors that could track a ship through hyperspace itself. The Zelkari vessel, Bloodhawk, hung motionless in the void, believing itself safely hidden in the shadow of a dead moon. "Target acquired," she whispered to her crew of 12 specialists, each one a veteran of humanity's most classified operations. "The children are aboard that ship. We go in quiet, we go in fast, and we bring our kids home." Her squadron of 6 stealth ships moved like ghosts through space, their hulls absorbing every wavelength of radiation that might reveal their presence. The Bloodhawk was a formidable vessel, heavily armed and shielded, but its crew never saw death approaching. The Pu attack came from all sides simultaneously. Ion cannons fired in perfect synchronization, overloading the slaver ship's systems without breaching its hull. The Bloodhawk went dark in seconds, its weapons powerless, its engines dead, its crew trapped inside a metal coffin floating in space. "This is Captain Na of the Terran Rapid Response Force," she announced as her Marines breached the ship's hull using cutting tools that sliced through alien metal like butter. "We are coming aboard. Any being who has harmed our children will answer to human justice. Those who surrender will be treated according to galactic law." The Marines moved through the ship's corridors like avenging angels, their armor painted with the symbols of their home units and the names of the children they had come to save. They found Captain Vextar cowering in his ready room, his crew scattered and demoralized. But their primary objective lay deeper in the ship's belly, in the cargo holds where 47 human children sat in cramped containment cells. The sight that greeted the Marines would fuel nightmares for years to come. Young faces pressed against energy barriers, eyes wide with fear and confusion, small hands reaching out desperately toward their rescuers. "We're here," whispered Corporal Park Ji-sung, his voice breaking as he deactivated the first cell and gathered 8-year-old Lee Ji-won into his arms. The little girl still clutched her toy rabbit, though it was now torn and dirty from the ordeal. "We're here and we're taking you home." Meanwhile, at the heart of Zelkari space, Admiral Choi Hyun-woo stood on the bridge of the battleship Indomitable Will, watching as the enemy homeworld grew larger on the main screen. The planet was protected by orbital defense platforms that had never been breached in 3 centuries of warfare, a ring of steel and energy that had made the Zelkari Empire believe itself invincible. "All batteries, prepare for coordinated strike," he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Target the defense platforms. Disable their weapons but preserve life support. We are not monsters, even if they are." The human fleet opened fire with weapons that shouldn't have existed according to galactic intelligence reports. Particle beams that punched through energy shields like they were made of paper. Quantum torpedoes that phased through physical armor to detonate inside target systems. Gravity manipulators that crushed orbital stations into compact balls of scrap metal. The Zelkari defense grid, once the pride of their military, lasted exactly 57 minutes against humanity's true capabilities. When the barrage ended, the homeworld hung defenseless in space, its population stunned into silence by the revelation of their complete vulnerability. "This is Admiral Choi of the Terran Federation," his voice echoed across every communication frequency on the planet. "Your military is broken, your empire is finished, but your people can still live if you choose cooperation over destruction. The age of Zelkari expansion is over. The age of human oversight has begun. In less than 6 hours, humanity had demonstrated to the galaxy that their reputation as peaceful newcomers had been the greatest deception in galactic history. The real question now was what they would do with their newfound dominance. The autumn wind swept across the golden fields of New Busan colony as Lee Ji-won ran through the tall grass, her laughter echoing across the peaceful landscape. 6 months had passed since the nightmare that had changed everything, and while the 8-year-old still woke up screaming some nights, today she was simply a child playing in the sunshine. Above her, the familiar bulk of Captain Song Min-ho's gunship, Iron Phoenix, traced lazy circles in the sky, its weapon systems powered down but always ready. The mercenary captain had kept his promise to stay, turning down lucrative contracts across the galaxy to maintain his protective watch over the children of New Busan. "Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, came the voice of his sensor operator, Petty Officer Kim Dae-sung, his cybernetic arm interfacing directly with the ship's detection grid. Unknown vessel approaching from hyperspace. Song leaned forward in his command chair, instantly alert. "Classification." "It's a Coraxian diplomatic courier, sir. They're broadcasting standard peaceful approach codes and requesting permission to land." The captain's scarred face showed no emotion, but his crew knew him well enough to recognize the subtle tension in his shoulders. Since the Zelkari War, as historians were already calling it, no alien vessel approached New Busan without careful scrutiny. "Helm, move us to intercept position." Weapons to stand by, but don't paint them with targeting systems yet. Let's see what they want. Down on the planet's surface, Park Minji watched her students through the classroom window, her heart still clenching. Every time one of them moved out of her direct line of sight, the trauma counselor had told her this would fade with time, but 6 months later, she still counted heads obsessively throughout each day. The new school building was a fortress, disguised as a place of learning. Its walls contained armor plating that could stop military-grade weapons. Its windows were made of transparent aluminum that could withstand starship-level impacts, and hidden weapon systems tracked every moving object within a 10-kilometer radius. But the children didn't need to know those details. They just needed to feel safe. "Miss Park," called out 12-year-old Park Ji-ho, his voice carrying the confidence that had been slowly returning over the past months. "When are we going to learn about the other planets again?" Minji smiled, remembering how that same boy had refused to speak for weeks after his rescue from the Zelkari slave ship. The psychological scars were healing, but they would never completely disappear. "Tomorrow, Ji-ho, we'll learn about the Visari homeworld and their crystal cities." What she didn't mention was that the Visari had sent 14 separate diplomatic missions to human space, all desperately trying to rebuild relationships that had been shattered when they failed to immediately condemn the Zelkari actions. The galaxy had learned that neutrality was no longer an option when human children were involved. Light years away, in the marble halls of the Galactic Consortium's capital world, Ambassador Kethral of the Visari Alliance stood before the assembled representatives of 47 different species. His blue-scaled hands trembled slightly as he read from the document that would reshape galactic politics forever. Resolution 2847 officially designated the Terra Protocol, he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. Human civilians, particularly their young, are to be considered under universal protection. Any species that violates this protocol will face immediate and total war with humanity. This resolution passes by unanimous vote. The silence that followed was deafening. Not a single representative had dared to vote against the measure, not after witnessing what had happened to the Zelkari Empire. The vote wasn't about diplomacy or justice, it was about survival. In the months following the children's rescue, humanity had methodically erased the Zelkari Empire from existence, not through conquest or occupation, but through something far more thorough. Every Zelkari military vessel had been destroyed or captured. Every government official had been tried by human military tribunals. Every piece of slaving infrastructure had been reduced to scrap metal. The surviving Zelkari population, roughly 3 billion individuals, had been relocated to supervised colony worlds where human administrators oversaw their transition to a post-imperial society. It wasn't cruel or vengeful, it was simply complete. The Zelkari Empire had ceased to exist as if it had never been born. "I have been asked to provide historical context for this resolution," Kethral continued, his voice growing stronger. 6 months ago, most of us believed humanity to be a minor power, perhaps slightly more aggressive than average, but ultimately manageable. We were catastrophically wrong. The holographic displays around the chamber showed tactical analyses that had been compiled by every major intelligence service in the galaxy. The data painted a picture that still sent chills through experienced military minds. Humanity's true fleet strength wasn't the few hundred vessels they had openly displayed, but over 15,000 ships hidden in deep space installations, sleeper cells and camouflaged bases throughout the galaxy. Their technology wasn't decades behind the galactic standard. It was generations ahead, concealed behind deliberately primitive facades. "We now understand that humans are not newcomers to galactic civilization," Kethral explained to the assembled delegates. "They are ancient hunters who learned long ago that the greatest advantage in any conflict is to let your enemies underestimate you completely. What we perceived as diplomatic weakness was actually patience on a scale we couldn't comprehend." The ambassador paused, accessing his personal datapad to read from notes he had compiled during months of careful study. Their response to the Zelkari aggression revealed capabilities that violate our understanding of physics, logistics, and military doctrine. They demonstrated the ability to coordinate simultaneous operations across hundreds of star systems. They showed weapons technology that our scientists insist should be impossible. Most terrifying of all, they did it without revealing the full extent of their capabilities. A nervous murmur ran through the chamber as delegates contemplated the implications. If humanity had held back during their overwhelming victory against the Zelkari, what other surprises might they be hiding? Back on New Busan, Lee Ji-won had finished her game and was walking back toward the school building when she noticed the adults talking in hushed, serious tones. Captain Song had landed his ship and was speaking with her teacher, both of them, glancing occasionally at the sky. The little girl wasn't old enough to understand galactic politics or military strategy, but she could sense the protective atmosphere that surrounded her like an invisible shield. Every adult in the colony watched over the children with an intensity that bordered on reverence, as if they were precious artifacts that must be guarded at all costs. "Miss Park," Ji-won said, tugging on her teacher's sleeve, "are the bad aliens coming back?" Minji knelt down to the child's eye level, her expression gentle but absolutely certain. "No, sweetheart, they're never coming back. And if any other bad people ever try to hurt children like you, there are millions of good people who will stop them." It was a promise that extended far beyond New Busan colony. Throughout human space, the message had been received and understood by every man, woman, and child. The protection of human young was now the galaxy's highest priority, enforced not by law or treaty, but by the absolute certainty of overwhelming retaliation. As Ambassador Kethrol concluded his address to the Galactic Consortium, his final words captured the new reality that every species would have to accept. We learned too late that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology, their numbers, or their military might. It was their absolute refusal to abandon their own. They do not negotiate when their children are threatened. They do not compromise. They do not show mercy to those who would harm the innocent. They simply win, completely and forever. The children of New Busan grew up in a galaxy that had been fundamentally changed by their ordeal. They would never know fear from alien threats again, not because of treaties or diplomatic agreements, but because 47 kidnapped children had revealed humanity's true nature to the universe. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Human children were not to be touched, not to be threatened, not even to be looked at with hostile intent. The price of that knowledge had been the complete destruction of an empire, and every species understood that the same fate awaited anyone foolish enough to test humanity's resolve again. The end.